All right, it is 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and I welcome everyone who is joining me live today, and I welcome everyone who will be watching this through the video recording. It's great to be here with you. Welcome to Dexter, Michigan, where I'm at today in my office here. I am Matt Emhoff. I am a spiritual and life coach, as well as the director of Deeper Ministry. And what we do is train you in the art of living free. And obviously, over the past month, our lives have changed drastically. So, what it means to live free has changed some as well. So, we're learning how to do that um, through our emotions, how to manage our emotions in a crisis, during a crisis. And so, this is actually part four, the fourth and final webinar in this series. We've been through part one, which is cultivating awareness in our lives and how to live emotionally healthy that way. Part two was the healthy emotional flow, introducing our four main emotions of fear, anger, sadness, and joy, how they work together and how we can work with them instead of against them. And part three, last time, was harnessing good fear and anger, and really about our fight or flight response and what happens to our bodies when we're in either physical or emotional danger. And again, how to work with that instead of against it, to know what's going on and how to respond well instead of just being reactive. And even this morning, there were a few things that I noticed in my life about emotions and how I was responding, or or others were responding in my family. So one of them was just maybe an hour ago or less. I was walking by our kitchen table, and Sherry, my wife, was doing schoolwork with the kids. Evelyn, who's 3, Nolan's who's 7, and Evelyn out of nowhere just goes, "I'm mad." And my wife was able to say, "Oh, okay, what are you mad about?" And then she described how she's mad because Nolan is not doing what she wanted him to do. And of course, then Sherry was able to talk to her about how we can't boss people around, and he's not going to respond well if you just tell him what to do. And how can we talk through this? And so, of course, that's not how it always goes with our kids or in our house. Sometimes there's screaming and throwing fits and all that. But we try to give our kids a healthy emotional vocabulary so they can respond. And sometimes that's better than most adults I know, who don't know that they're mad, or even if they do, hold it back and just become resentment and angry, or be reactive and yell and scream, or whatever it is. So that was neat to see that unfold. And the other thing that I noticed about myself is, as I'm coming up to this webinar, I'm starting to feel the anticipation of it. The adrenaline starts building. My body starts getting ready because I know something's coming where I'm gonna really try to show up. This is courageous. This is offering. There's a little bit of risk here. There's a little bit of fear here for me as well. And so it's a mixed bag. But I felt that happening, and I'm sitting here at my computer doing some work about an hour ago and saying, you know what? This is getting to a little bit of an uncomfortable level. This isn't great for my body to just stay here, because my body is wanting to fight or flight, do something about this. But I obviously can't do something until 11 a.m. About this exact thing. So I got up, went outside. It's freezing cold here, so I got a jacket on, went outside and went for a walk, just for a few minutes. And I felt my body start to shift into, oh, it's really cold out here, kind of a slap in the face. Now I have to protect myself against the cold. And just moving and walking around, being in nature, expends a little bit of energy, a little bit of adrenaline, so I can come back to a little bit of a healthier place. It's not all gone, but it helped me do that. So very simple things that we can do to work with those emotions instead of against them. So as we go today, as before, any questions you might want to ask, just put them in the chat section, type those out, and I will get back to you on those questions as well. So I actually want to start with a poem today. I had a client who shared, a coaching client who shared a poem with me about just kind of how they're feeling and their reaction to this corona crisis and quarantine that we're in right now. Um, he says this: I just don't write right now. Complete thoughts don't come. They don't come to me. They don't come out. It's like one chapter was left unfinished and I was getting to the good part, and the next just barged right in. Unasked for, unexpected, unwanted. How do we salvage the love of a life we didn't even realize we had? Maybe we'll know when we can find the words for it. Um, I just thought that was a great way to put it into poem, and to say this whole time in our life has just kind of barged in, and it's unasked for, unexpected, unwanted in a lot of ways. And we're all kind of trying to figure out what the heck is going on, to put words to it, to put understanding to it. So welcome, because we're all in it together. And I want to honor that, there are a lot of things that are affecting us within this corona crisis that we're in, and what's going on with that. But even though some parts of our life have been paused, many parts of our life has not been paused. And there's some good things that we're still doing, but there's also some really hard things that we're going through that have nothing to do with the worldwide crisis that we're in, and yet are affected by it nonetheless, because of the limitations, because of the intensity of it. I just had a friend tell me that they had to put their dog down recently, had to make the decision to do that. Heartbreaking, and they're finding encouragement in these webinars to work their way through that. I know people and have clients that are working through things, struggles in their marriage or with their parents, or struggles in their own hearts and their own emotions and that kind of thing. So we're all in it. And so when we talk about our emotions and how to manage them, it's not just for a worldwide pandemic, of course. It's for everyday life. It's for everything that we go through. Okay. Um, and so, we're going to talk about sadness and joy today, how to harness the good emotions of sadness and joy. And what sadness is trying to tell us is it's time to let go, which is really hard for us, and we don't like that. All right. So last time I shared with you Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm going to share that chart with you again, because this is often where the emotional flow starts, when we feel threatened. And one of these things is feeling threatened. And so fear reacts to the pain as we're in danger, right? Anger reacts to that pain as in there's a boundary being broken that we need to fix or put back right. And but sadness reacts as something is being lost. We're experiencing a loss right now. And as you look through this hierarchy, you can see and probably relate to some of the things that you're feeling as loss. Okay. And the problem is with all that is that we're not made to have to let go. We're not made for the finality of death. We're made for Eden. We're made for eternity, right? So our emotions are trying to help us process all this. But after the fear and anger kind of die down, the fight or flight response happens, the adrenaline, all that takes about 15 minutes after the whatever it is done to calm down again. What now? Because sometimes we're still in pain. Sometimes we've done whatever we can through fear, through anger, and setting boundaries, and we're still struggling. And that's where sadness comes in, right? And and so it's really difficult, and so we need help moving through the things that we experience as loss, because it breaks our hearts. We even say that sometimes: my heart is broken for you, for me, for others that are going through something. There's a rift in our soul because we're made for eternity, we're made for Eden, and we're not getting that. It's a different reality. We have to face something that is excruciating. And it's amazing because right now in the world, everyone's experiencing it differently, but we're all grieving the loss of our normal everyday lives, of our normal everyday freedoms, of our normal everyday everydays, whatever you do in your everyday. And that is painful, and we're trying to figure out what to do about that. So we are grieving. We're in a collective grieving. Okay. And so I just want to give you a fair warning that as we start out today, as we start out with sadness and grief, it's a little bit of a heavy topic. So I promise we're going to move in to joy, as sadness always moves into joy eventually as we talk through things and that kind of thing. So just hang in there with me. We all have sadnesses and excruciating things that we've been through. Some of them we've grieved, some of them have been left ungrieved. And it's going to be really helpful and really healthy to learn how to navigate those things. And so what I believe that we need when we're in sadness is we need a funeral. Sounds kind of weird, I know, but we need a funeral. Now, for me, growing up, I didn't go to a lot of funerals, which I think is a good thing, but I'm not sure, because I often wanted to avoid pain. I wanted to avoid sadness in everyday life. And so I didn't really understand funerals. I know we're supposed to, honor people's lives, and that's good, but there's just a heaviness and a sadness and a hurting when somebody dies. And part of me says, why do I want to feel that more? I'm sure you can relate sometimes when you're feeling pain or thinking about that. You go, why would I go into that anymore? That sucks. That hurts. I don't like it. But what a funeral does, and I've learned this over time as I've entered into it more, is really take us by the hand and help our emotions, help our body, help our understanding that there is a new reality. The world before was different than the world now. And through symbolism, through the honoring of the person, through the conversations that happen, something in us starts to accept reality, as painful as it is. So I actually was at a funeral a little over a year ago, and it was my wife's grandmother. Her name's Grandma Dory, and just an amazing woman, about 86 years old, had a lot of medical complications, a lot of pain in her body. And I didn't know her much up until the last couple of years of her life, but she had such an impact on me and so many other people. She was a beautiful woman. Even in the pain, she had so much grace and kindness, and was grateful and funny and smart. And I think the thing I loved about her the most was her sassiness. Like, she just didn't care. She wasn't embarrassed by much. She just said what she thought, and it was awesome. And so she passed away, and we're invited to this funeral in Chicago. And I get there, and I'm told I'm going to be a pallbearer. And I did not know this, and I was certainly not didn't have the clothes for a traditional Catholic Little Italy in Chicago type funeral to be up front and center. But I got over that quickly. I'm okay with me, and I entered in, and I really allowed it to be something that taught me and invited me to say, what is this really about? What is this grief thing really about? And it was such a gift to learn and to grow in that way. And it was painful, and it wasn't fun, but I entered in. And I remember one moment when it was an open casket, and people were saying their goodbyes at the wake, and it was the moment I realized they were going to shut the door on the casket. And there was a part of me that wanted to look away. And that part of me that wanted to look away is the part of me that was made for eternity. No, I'm not supposed to have to give this woman up. I'm not supposed to have to understand this depth of pain and hurt. And yet there was something in me that also nudged me to watch closely, because as that door shut to the casket, something in me said, it's finished. It's over. There's a new reality that now I have to move into. And of course, that wasn't the end of it. There were other times where the family talked about her, and many of us are still in and out of grieving and missing her and that kind of thing. And so what that did for me and for others is take us by the hand and lead us through our grief, lead us through sadness, to what is called sorrow. So sadness is telling us it's time to let go. But sorrow is when we finally actually do let go or start letting go, and we're faced with that new reality, because we try to hold on to what should be, what we want it to be, what was. And when it's not anymore, we start making this shift, but that shift takes time, and we need help along the way, which is what sadness does and our emotions do to help us along the way. We need a funeral, we need a way, a path to understand how to let go, whether it's about the crisis or a loved one passing or any other grief or loss that you have in your life, right? An example of this, we take a funeral and the symbolism and the principle of it, and apply it to a lot of other situations. Where I have a friend who, in probably his 50s, he actually did a funeral for a symbolic funeral for his parents who are still alive, because his parents are not the parents that he needed or wish they were. And so what happened was he kept going back to them and talking to them, but every time there would be this little boy in him saying, maybe now they'll love me the way I need to be loved. Maybe now they'll be proud of me. Maybe now, but it wasn't. It was, man, if you would only do these things, you're not enough yet. And kind of the same old wounding from childhood. And so what he did is actually do a funeral, a symbolic funeral for his heart, for that little boy, for the emotions inside of him, to say, it's over. They're not going to give you that love, and they're not the people that we need to go for that love. But we have to accept how painful that is. The loss of what should have been, what my parents should have been, and how they should have acted and loved me, is not happening. All right. And so it's really helpful to go through that pain and loss, and we have to sit in sadness a lot of times. And what we want to do is avoid it, push away, distract ourselves, that kind of thing. And there's times when we say, no, we need a pause. This is too heavy, too much. But don't do that for too long, because we can stay stuck in sadness, and it can be detrimental to our emotional health and sometimes even our physical health. So one of the ways that I do this, and I offer this to clients through this coaching tool, is what I call the yesterday journal. And it's kind of like a mini funeral for yesterday, for the losses and hurts that we've had. And so basically, very simple. All you do is look at yesterday, or maybe the last couple days or the last week or whatever time frame, and ask 4 questions and journal about it. And the first question is, what am I grateful for? That's just a good place to start, so we can see what is good. What am I grateful for? But then the second thing is, what have I lost? In this context that we're talking about, what emotional losses, what emotional pain have I been in the last couple of days? To honor it, to look at, to see what it is, right? We want to do that, which can be all kinds of losses, expectations that are not met, things that we were hoping for that didn't work, failures that we experience, all kinds of things. So we write those things down. And then number 3 is, then what do I need to surrender? What do I need to let go of? And it may be that, very simply, the thing that is the loss, or there could be other things around it that surround it that we're holding on to. But again, it's coming face to face with, it's time to let go. So what do I have to let go of? And number 4 is, and what am I being called to do? Because often when we do finally let go, it creates space to see what is and how we can move forward. We don't want to jump the gun. We don't want to get there too quickly. But we want to ask that question to see, are we ready yet? Is there anything that we can do yet to move forward in? And oftentimes there are, and they can be really beneficial. So that's the yesterday journal. I will include that as a link, a document link with this video when I post it as well, so you can have access to that tool. Because it's really about, and another way of saying it is really about letting go of control, which obviously we don't like. But sadness is trying to help us let go of control, trying to keep what should be, trying to figure it all out with our own way of doing things. And the reality is, we don't like this, but the reality is we come up against things that are bigger than us, that are stronger than us, that are immovable. And then what do? There's no way to figure this one out. There's no way to get around it. There's no way to jump over it, go under it, anything. So what are we going to do, right? And Richard Rohr has this great quote that's been helpful for me in situations like this, where he says, we can either try to fit everyone and everything into our own perspective, or we cannot allow everything or everyone to broaden our perspective, right? And so it's much more comfortable to try to fit everything that's happening and everyone and their perspectives and what they're doing into our own way of living, into our own rules, into our own comfort zone, to say, oh, now I understand it this way. Now I understand why this works or doesn't work, or that kind of thing. But when we come up against things that are bigger than us, we just can't fit it into our own perspective. It's bigger than us. It's beyond our comfort zone. And so we can either fight it and stay stuck in it, or we can allow it to change us. And that's the real beauty of this combination of sadness and joy, what we call the pattern of renewal, because what it's always trying to do is help us transform. And it doesn't always feel like that. It's definitely not always fun. Or usually it's not, but it's about transformation. And when we transform, it means change. And we don't like change because it's uncomfortable. It's out of our control. It's bigger than we can usually handle. And yet it makes us stronger. It makes us smarter. It makes more courageous, and those types of things, right? So one of the things that's really helpful about sadness is it teaches us how to forgive. And so forgiveness is really just the spiritual word for letting go, right? And so what forgiveness is trying to help us do is say, let's say somebody offends you in some way. And what it's really trying to do is help us say, I no longer hold you accountable for my pain. Even if you're the one that did it, even if I don't like what you're doing, eventually maybe we can get to a place where you say, I don't hold you accountable for, number one, healing or fixing my pain. And number two, you kind of pushing back or telling them, this is what you did. I want you to feel the pain that you inflicted on me. It's kind of an ugly part of our humanity, but it hurts. And when we're hurting, sometimes we transmit that pain to other people, especially the ones that we feel like hurt us. And so what forgiveness does is release that other person and really release us from trying to hold that person there, and the resentment and the pain kind of just stays when we don't forgive, when we don't let go. And so we, again, release them from the accountability of fixing my pain or feeling the pain that they caused. And so we can do that, of course, with other people. We have to forgive people for not loving us the way that we need to be loved. We need to forgive the situation. We're in this weird crisis, the coronavirus. Are we mad at a virus? Are we holding a virus accountable for the pain that I feel? It doesn't work very well. It's not very satisfying. So sometimes we just have to say, this is a crappy moment in time. This sucks. And we have to forgive reality for not meeting our expectations of what we think it should be, and letting that go. And again, this is a process. It's not easy. It's not quick. We honor the process of letting go of that. We have to forgive ourselves for not being perfect. As we said before, this is my first worldwide pandemic. How about you? Right? We're learning as we go, and we won't do it perfectly. We will let ourselves down sometimes. And so we have to forgive ourselves for that. And finally, this sounds really weird, but we have to forgive God. Not because God's done anything wrong, but because we hold an expectation of God sometimes to come through for us in certain ways that we think he should, and then he doesn't. Because we're holding him to our expectations, to our way of doing it. And so we release him from trying to get him to do what we think he should do, which creates space to look at what he's actually doing and what he's inviting us into, right? So sadness helps us learn forgiveness and the letting go. So I want to tell you a little bit about my grief journey, not the whole thing, but a few parts of it, because it's been really important for me to learn. Because again, growing up, I'm like, no, I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to grieve. That sounds terrible. That sounds not fun. So I'm not going to. And yet, it's such a part of our healthy emotional flow. It keeps us stuck in places. We really won't mature very well if we don't learn to grieve. As I said before, John Eldredge said in one of his teachings that we have to grieve every day. And when I heard that, I said, no way, I'm not going to grieve every day. That sounds terrible. And yet now I do most days, at least at some point, honor pain or expectations that aren't met or boundaries that are broken or loss that I'm experiencing, because I notice it, I'm more aware of it, I've been exercising that muscle and moving it into it more. But it takes a long time to learn that and grow in that. And so there was a time about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago where 2 or 3 things happened, as sometimes they do, kind of piling up, of really crappy things that happened to my wife and I. And one of them was my dog, Toby, and had started to have some weird symptoms and not feel very good. We took him into the vet. And later on that day, the vet called me and said he has very advanced cancer and he's going to die probably within the week. And I was just stunned, didn't see it coming. And it was so strange. I remember this very clearly on the phone. There was this little boy that kind of came out of nowhere, this little voice, tender voice that said, did I do it? Is there anything we could have done differently? And I was kind of like, whoa, what is that? And the vet handled it so kindly. She just said, no, there's nothing that we can do. That, you know, these things just happen and all that. And so hung up the phone and I just dropped to the floor and wept. I wept. And I've got to be honest, there was the adult part of me, the part of me that was supposed to have it under control. The editor was saying, whoa, 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 this is just a dog. We don't have to go there. Why are you crying so hard? You know, why is this so intense? That kind of thing. But as I've been learning about this grief journey, one of the key factors is don't stop the flow. When tears come, when emotion comes, don't stop it. It's trying to do something good. It's trying to help. And so I did, and I wept, and it hurt, and it sucked. And we had about a week with Toby, and I spent a lot of time with him. He was just laying around, so I would lay with him and pet him, and we'd tell stories about all the stupid things that he did, all the, you know, how crazy he was around people, and all the wonderful things that he did, and all that. And then the other thing we did was we invited our son Nolan, who was probably 3 at the time, into that. And I know not all kids are the same and that kind of thing, but we wanted him to start understanding loss and death as a part of life, at his level, right? We don't put everything on him right now, but we wanted to invite him in. We didn't want to just pretend like it wasn't happening or rush out to get another dog right away, or we just said, hey, bud, this is what's happening. Toby's dying and he's going to go to heaven and all that. And so he was a part of that too. Now, Evelyn was just a baby, so she didn't know what was going on, and that's okay. So anyways, it was fascinating. We all go through grief in different ways. So I was grieving through that whole week, and it wasn't until the moment that I was lifting Toby into our car to take him to the vet that my wife Sherry started crying, and that's when her grief happened. She's more about the present moment, and this is what's happening right now. I'm more about what's coming, what's the future. And as a side note, a lot of times people who struggle with anxiety think a lot about the future and the fear that is coming or what's coming ahead. We start feeling that emotion ahead of time because anxiety is fear of the future. So I was feeling a lot of the sadness and the grief before, obviously, Toby was gone, and Sherry felt it at the moment. And so, of course, had to take him to the vet and put him down, and that was excruciating. And then comes the part of grief, which is this letting go process where my mind, my body, my emotion still is holding on to a reality subconsciously that Toby's still around. So there's moments where I go, okay, time to let the dog out. Oh, he's not here. Or, oh crap, do we leave Toby out? Is he going to run away again? Oh, he's not here. And the worst was him and I just love, I love taking walks, and he would love going on walks with me in the woods. And he was so awesome that way. And I would go out and get there, and I would just naturally go to the back of the car and lift the gate and the Jeep to let him out, and he wasn't there. Oh, right. It's just it's so hard for us to let go. We're not meant to have to deal with this, but we do. We're made for eternity. We're made for Eden, and yet we're not living there. And so there is this process of letting go that we're entering into, and when these hard things hit. Another example that's even harder was about over a year ago now. My wife and I experienced a miscarriage. This is the second miscarriage that we've experienced, and it was devastating. If you've had miscarriages, you know, the hope and the excitement and the dreaming of a new life just boom, taken away. Oh, it hurts so bad, and there's grieving that we have to do in that. And so my wife and I, we didn't talk a lot about it, but we just sat and cried, and I gave her a lot of space to feel what she was feeling and all that. And we talked about it. And again, Nolan was about 5 years old. Evelyn was still young enough where she didn't quite understand what was going on, but we had told Nolan that there's a baby growing inside of mama's belly and all that kind of stuff. And so we said, we got to tell him, because we can't, you know, he's gonna figure it out. And we do not. The thing about parenting young kids is we have to interpret even the hard things, because when we ignore them, they will find their own interpretation. And that's what's so devastating later on in life, where the interpretation has something to do with their identity, or they make negative agreements about it or whatever. So we are going to interpret the situation with Nolan, 5 years old. So we sit him down. It's just the three of us. Evelyn's on her nap or whatever. And we say, hey, bud, we got some sad news to tell you, that the baby died and is not going to make it. And the baby's going to go to heaven to be with Jesus, but not with us. And so you could see the wheels turning in his head, okay, trying to figure it out. And this was excruciating. I did not want to do this. It took a lot of courage to bring this up with my little boy when I was already hurting and my wife was already hurting. And so I said, and then we wanted to lead him through the emotional, healthy way to deal with this. I said, Nolan, I feel sad. I feel sad about this. I hurt about this. I don't like this. And he said, okay, I'm sorry. And then I said, Nolan, I need you to do something. I needed you to ask mama, how do you feel about this? You know, help him practice empathy. And so mama said, I feel sad. I feel heartbroken, you know. And then of course with Nolan, we've primed him now. We've let him know our emotions. We're leading him through this by the hand. And then we say, hey buddy, how do you feel about this? It's okay if you don't know already, but how do you feel? And he said, I feel sad. And then he waited a minute and he goes, but at least we have a Christmas tree. And I was like, what? It was Christmas time and we had a Christmas tree. And I'm telling you, that kid, he is so good at seeing the beauty and goodness and joy in situations. And we don't want to just jump over the sadness and the hurt, but he does that so well. And then we had this conversation, and there was this moment that happened after that. It was one of my favorite moments in Nolan's life so far, where he kind of just, the light bulb went on and he almost gasped. And he said, oh, wait a second. God is real. Heaven is real. And I said, yeah, buddy, it is. And we had this amazing conversation about God and heaven, and not just that God's in heaven, but he's available to us now. And at one point, Nolan said, man, I hope the baby loves dogs. And I was like, what are you talking about? Oh, because the only people or things that Nolan knows that are in heaven are Toby and Scout, our dog and my parents' dog. And I just love his little brain as he's processing through all this, and that kind of thing. But in the midst of this awful grief and pain and loss, there is also joy and goodness when we enter into it. We don't know what that's going to look like. I didn't know what Nolan's response was going to be. We ended up having this amazing conversation about God and about life and all that. And it was a part of our grieving process. And I just want to say, you have things in your life that have been excruciating, and my heart breaks for you and with you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And our emotions are meant to be a help for those things, to help us grieve, to help us go through those things, help us to deal with loss in healthy ways and not just sweep it under. And so if you have things that are ungrieved, I would encourage you to start that process, and I can help you. There's others that can help you in that, but don't keep it buried, and that kind of thing, because the short-term pain is going to be long-term freedom. And that's way better than the short-term ignorance or ignoring that pain is going to be long-term pain and suffering and resentment and darkness and all that kind of stuff often. So I want to enter in. So I want to read from a book by Henry Nouwen. It's called Spiritual Formation. This is one of the places where I look to kind of find emotional health kind of stuff and along the way, along the journey. I'm reading from a chapter called From Sorrow to Joy, very fitting. And he says, what do we do with our losses? That's the big question that faces all of us. Well, here's an option, the possibility of mourning. Yes, you can mourn your losses. You cannot talk or act them away, but you can shed the tears over them and allow yourself to grieve deeply. You can never get to the joy if you dare not cry, if you do not have the courage to weep, if you don't take the opportunities to experience the pain. The world says, just ignore it, be strong, don't cry, get over it, move on. But if you don't mourn, you can become bitter. And all your grief can go right into your deepest self and sit there for the rest of your life. So dare to feel your losses. Dare to grieve them. Name the pain and say, yes, I feel real pain, real fear, and real loss, and I'm going to embrace it. Wow. Talk about a punch in the gut. That's not what we want to do. And yet it's fascinating to find that it is the path to healing, to restoration, to freedom, is through the pain, not around it, through the sorrow and loss, not around it. And what haunts me from that whole thing is the very end, where he says, embrace your pain. And again, that's like, no. I tried really hard not to embrace my pain. And he doesn't say like begrudgingly allow it, kind of give a little space for it, let it in once in a while. He's saying embrace it, hug it, bring it in to yourself. What we call integration. We want to integrate our pain into our story, allow it to be a part of who we are. I remember years ago, my friend and mentor, Mark Fryer, was talking about what is our identity as human beings. And he named it as being broken and beloved children, broken and beloved. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, beloved. I like that. That sounds great. I want to be beloved. I think I'm a pretty good guy. There's a lot of belovedness in me. This is great. And he's like, yeah, but there's the other part of brokenness. And I was like, oh, no. I don't want that to be a part of my identity. I've worked really hard all my life to keep my brokenness at a distance, to edit it out, to make sure it's not a part of my everyday, put it behind the curtain so I don't have to deal with it. And yet, through the years and through my journey, it's become abundantly clear that the way is with embracing pain, embracing brokenness, messiness, the moments where we feel embarrassed or confused or lost, we don't have the answer, we're hurting, all those types of things, right? It's what Brene Brown would call vulnerability. We invite that to be a part of us instead of pushing it away. Because again, it becomes that like that little child and just shouts all the more when we ignore it, when we push it down. But it is in the integration that we allow. Now, we don't have to stay there because we can always grow and become better and stronger. But we allow the pain of our wounds and that sometimes become scars to teach us and allow it to be a part of our journey. And that's super important. Super important. That's how sadness and joy works together, when it's a part of the journey, not separate. So later on, he continues by saying, mourning and dancing are a part of the same movement of grace. Somehow in the midst of your tears, a gift of life is given. Somehow in the midst of your mourning, the first steps of the dance takes place. Those who cannot grieve cannot be joyful. Those who cannot, those who are not, those who have not been sad cannot be glad. Quite often, right in the midst of your crying, your smile comes through the tears. And while you are mourning, you are already working on the choreography of your dance. Your tears of grief have softened your spirit and opened up the possibility to say thank you. Thank you. You can claim your unique journey as God's way to mold your heart and bring your joy, right? And so it's in this connection of the two, we see this beautiful movement of renewal, right? So sadness is not the end of the story. Even when we do it in healthy ways, even when we attend the funeral that our emotions are trying to get us to do, to say, we got to move through this, we don't stop there. And thank God we don't stop there, right? Today is Good Friday. I love that it is Good Friday. It's perfect timing to talk about this stuff. But if today was the end of the story, in the story of Christ, if he died on the cross to forgive our sins and out of love and out of sacrifice, honestly, that'd be a beautiful thing, but it would not be enough, because we are made for eternity. We are made for redemption and healing and wholeness. We are made for the end of a story that says we are okay. We are valued. We are understood. We are accepted. We have healing. We have growth now. We can become the person that we were created to be. That is all built into us, and we need that. And that is why Easter is coming on Sunday, and why they're both part of the same journey. Two sides of the same coin. Sadness and joy work together in this pattern of renewal. Okay, so I want to give you an example of this pattern of renewal that I think is very practical, very beautiful. So to give you a little background, about 2 years ago, during the summer, I had mono. I was diagnosed with mono, which was so weird. I thought only like high school girls got that from making out with too many people. And now I'm a grown adult man that has mono, and my wife's like, who you been making out with? Obviously no one else but you, sweetie, but I don't know what's going on. But I had mono. I had a fever for 21 days straight. It was awful. And then after that, the fever was gone, but then it took me another month and a half to get back on my feet. I was exhausted and didn't have energy. And when I tried to push through, when I tried to just, do more things and get better that way, I would actually regress and it would become worse. So I had no choice other than just sit there and wait till I got better. And as a side note, it was actually weird thinking about this. It was almost, there's a lot of similarities between the crisis that we're in and the quarantine that we're in and that time for me, because my life paused. Everybody else's life just kept going. But I lost the ability to do a lot of the things I love to do and go for hikes and spend time with my kids doing stuff and my wife doing stuff. I feel like I lost that summer. And there were many other things that I lost. I lost clients in coaching because I couldn't do coaching for 21 days straight and even longer than that. And so there was just constant letting go. And there was a part of me that wanted to hang on and say, this isn't fair, and I don't like this, and this shouldn't be happening to me. And yet I'm learning the grieving process of saying, yeah, but this is what is. And what if I moved into accepting the reality as is? And there was a moment where my wife and I were talking about this towards the end of the time I was sick. And we were both in tears saying, we're so grateful for all the work I've done. Not that I did it perfectly, but she said, you would have been such a jerk to me and everybody if you had gone through this before all the work you've done on your heart and in your emotions. And it's true, because I got angry and I'd stayed stuck in anger and I wouldn't move on to sadness and acceptance. I would just stay and this isn't fair and get grumpy and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, we're at the end of this time, my birthday, July 29th. My wife throws me this party. It's a really cool party. We're at this rooftop bar overlooking a lake, a place we love, and that kind of thing. And so we're there. It's one of the first things I do after I've had this sickness. And we're there. this long table, and Grandma Dory comes to my birthday party. Now, as I said before, Grandma Dory had a lot of health issues in her body, was in a lot of pain. She had a walker, and there's this ramp. It was about 50 feet from ground floor up to this rooftop. And it took her probably 20, 25 minutes to walk the 50 feet up this ramp. And you talk about a warrior, talk about strength, talk about courage, talk about not caring what people might think. There were people that had to go around her and all that kind of stuff. She just stopped and waited, and then took her breaks and went all the way up, and all that. And so she finally gets up there, and we get a table. We have this long table, and she is sitting at the end of the table because it's more room for her and her walker and everything. So my wife, Sherry, told me a story about the conversation she had with Grandma Dory during that time. And Sherry said to her, "Oh, Grandma, I'm so sorry that you're at the end of this table because, you're missing out on the conversation. You don't know what's being said." And her Grandma Dory's response astounded me. She said, "Oh, sweetie, I am loving this. I am delighting in everybody's faces and their laughter and watching the children play. And this is wonderful." Wow. Wow. Talk about somebody who has integrated their pain into their life enough to see the goodness. Because I know for me, if I'm at a party and I'm sitting at the end and I can't hear and I'm not involved, I instantly go to, this isn't fair. I don't like this. I'm going to tell Sherry all about this later, and how, I want to throw a pity party and how it's not fair and all that kind of stuff. And she didn't even go there. That is incredible. That is incredible. So we can all learn how we can do this and see the goodness. And when we integrate our pain, it doesn't stop us from seeing the good, the joy, the beauty that's oftentimes right in front of us. And so don't stop the flow. When emotions come, when joy comes, when goodness comes, don't stop the flow. There's an editor inside us, the grown-up inside of us, that's trying to say, now we have to be responsible, and we have to make sure, we have to be in fear and make sure we see all the danger coming. And there's a time for that. There's a place for that, but that can't be happening all the time, or we will miss out on a big part of our heart and our life, and we will stay stuck instead of keeping those emotions flowing. Like we said before, it's like a flowing river brings life, and a stagnant pool brings disease and poison, right? So we want to keep it flowing, keep it going. Don't hold on to it. Excuse me. And one of the ways we can do this is make sure that we don't get stuck in sadness through blanket statements. Now, it's okay to make your stormy first draft and say what you need to say, but remember, we exaggerate when we're intensely emotional, and we don't want to latch on to the things that we're feeling. It's not very logical. It can oftentimes not be accurate. We need to feel it. We need to honor it. We need to move through it. But be careful. So we do this thing in sadness where we throw a blanket statement on things and say, "Oh, everything's terrible. Everything sucks." Especially in this time of the crisis, everybody wants to tell everybody how terrible it is. And it is. It really is. We don't want to stay stuck there, because we get into a cycle where all of a sudden everything's terrible. And then every moment we see through the lens of how terrible it is, and it reinforces, it proves our point again. See, I knew it. See, that happened again. See, I knew it. It's all terrible. So we don't want to, when we realize we're in that cycle, we want to get out of it by looking for what is good and what is healthy, which we can cultivate joy by doing a few things. And one is we want to move into the practice of gratitude. Right? And just being grateful. That first part of the yesterday journal, maybe that's the only part that you need to work on right now, is just what are 3 things that you're grateful for today, and why? Why is that good for you? And what that does is it opens up space for us to see more good. In fact, it's scientifically proven that our brains attach much more to negative than positive, and hold on much longer to the negative than the positive. And so we need to teach it. We need to exercise that muscle to find the good, to scan the world for good, and to hold on to it. And one of the ways we can do that is through gratitude, and the other way is through play. And as I said before, it's a great joy to have children right now, because they're reminding me how to play. All right. So my daughter is so good at hide and go seek in her way. She doesn't really understand the idea of staying hidden or being quiet. She loves being found, and that's so playful. And I can enter into that playfulness, but that's not really play to me. That's parenting, that's bonding, that's a lot of fun. But play to me is something that's not about achieving, not about figuring anything out, not no time limit. I just kind of get lost in it. I love hiking and exploring and finding new things, or reading a good book, or that kind of thing. Um, and so those are some ways that we can continue that flow instead of stopping it. Because sadness flows into joy, and this is a mystery. We don't get it, but it does. It really does. And we see this in the human spirit. It's built into us. Our courage, our ability to persevere, to move through things, to be victorious, it's there. In fact, all of creation is in this pattern of renewal. Every night becomes day in the sunrise. Every darkness becomes light again. I love this time of year when it's spring. The way that I know it's spring, the first thing that tells me it's spring is what are called peepers. In the way back of our yard, we have a swamp, and in that swamp, there are every spring there are things called peepers, and I think they're just baby frogs or tadpoles or something like that. But they make these peeping sounds, and I get so excited because it means spring is on the way, which means there's going to be more sunlight, more warmth. After a lot of cold days, after a lot of gray, Michiganders are now out in t-shirts and 50-degree weather because we're like, oh, finally, spring is here. Although yesterday we had sleet and snow and sunshine, and sometimes all at the same time. It was crazy. So Michigan is grieving the loss of winter, still holding on to that reality as it moves into summer, into what it's moving towards, right? And even the scripture, even the Bible talks about this constant pattern of renewal. It says things like Jesus has come to seek and save all that has been lost. And what a statement if we experience pain as loss. And what else do we want? What else do we need? What else are we looking for than somebody who's willing to save, somebody who's willing to heal, somebody who's willing to take us by the hand and walk through what has been lost, right? I've come to make all things new, right? If the old is gone and the new has come, we are new creations in Christ. If we have died with Christ, then we are raised into new life with him. We are new creations in Christ. It just keeps going and going and going. There is this constant pattern of renewal. And of course, this brings us to today, which is Easter weekend, which is Good Friday. And the cross is the quintessential symbol and gift of renewal, right? Because what it's saying is there's a crucifixion, and we have to grieve the loss. We have to hurt for 3 days. It takes a while. We're not just going to go through this quickly. But at the end of those 3 days, there is a resurrection, right? And this is always what God is doing. It's always what he has been doing. It's what he will be doing, and what he's doing in your life with your struggles, with your things that you're hurting in. He's bringing resurrection out of crucifixion. There's no resurrection without the crucifixion, right? But it is through the crucifixion that new life happens, right? He brings life out of death. He brings light out of darkness. Okay. And as we wind down here, I want to tell you about my experience last year around Easter. It was this really amazing time. I'd never experienced anything like it, where we went to a Good Friday service, and I'd been learning some of these things and really tapping into what does it mean? What does the death of Christ mean? What does that look like? And I never really understood Good Friday before until then, that it's really a funeral. That's what the people that were with Jesus experienced on that day. It was his death and funeral those 3 days, right? And so I went to an evangelical church service and came there to experience a funeral in my heart and my emotions. And it was so strange because, as a lot of evangelical churches do, it was upbeat worship music. And it was not matching my emotion. And I was like, what is going on? And I was getting a little frustrated, just trying to stay centered. This is okay. I'll just stay in my emotion and my space here. And so I'm just kind of connecting with God and relating my brokenness, my hurts, my loss with Christ and his loss and his brokenness and for us and all that. And at the end of the service at this church, it was amazing. Everything else didn't match up until this point. 2 bagpipers came out on stage and they were playing Amazing Grace. And they walked down the stage and out and led the procession of everyone in the church out of the room. And I wept because it just released all the sadness. This is my friend Jesus, and I'm at his funeral, and it breaks my heart that he's dying, that he's hurting. And I can relate to that because I have things in my life that I've died to, that are hurting, that are confused, that are lost, right? And so I went through this kind of grieving over that weekend, and then it was really almost funny looking back. On Sunday morning, I got to church, and it was kind of the same pace. It was some upbeat worship music. All right, Jesus is alive, yes, indeed, and all that. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is all we're doing? We need to throw a parade. Where's the confetti? Where are the fireworks? Jesus is alive. Do you know this? I was just like freaking out. People are like, what? Yeah, we know this. But because I had experienced emotionally the death of Christ, I was experiencing emotionally the resurrection of Christ. And it was beautiful. It was a way different way than I had ever experienced it. And I was so excited. It was truly good news. It was truly exciting. It was truly something I wanted to tell people about. And it was truly something that I wanted to live out, which is this constant pattern of renewal, right? And so I am so excited for all of us that we get to experience this renewal in the symbolic gesture and gift that Christ does to show us this is what your lives are about. See how built in it is to our hearts? It is in our emotions. It is the way that we process things to be renewed, to go into grief and loss so that there can be a rebirth into life. Right? It is not something out there. It is not something just that Christ did a long time ago. It is happening over and over in each one of us. Right? So look for that. Look for that, because this is what God is always doing. He's bringing resurrection out of crucifixion. He's bringing life out of death. He's bringing healing out of brokenness. He's bringing wholeness out of our brokenness and shame. He is bringing us back to life. And we have to be in the hurts and the pains and the loss and grieve those things and honor those. And maybe we're not ready to experience the life yet, but it's coming and it's worth it, right? So there is a verse in the Bible that talks about Jesus saying, for the joy set before him, he went to the cross. Now, what was the joy that was set before Jesus? It wasn't the cross. It wasn't the pain. It wasn't the suffering. That's not joy, right? When we face sadness and loss and hurt and pain, that's not joy. We don't do it for that reason because we think it's fun to do or something. What was before Jesus that was so joyful, that was worth going through all that for, was you. It was me. He said, you are worth it. You are worth saving, inviting, being with, loving, creating a path of renewal for you. You are worth it. So could we have the audacity to love ourselves the same way? The audacity to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you are worth feeling for. You are worth feeling fear for and learning its language and doing fear well. You are worth being angry for and defending sometimes and setting healthy boundaries for. You are worth grieving for, crying for, weeping for, and you are worth feeling joy for. Because Jesus says, yes, you are. By his actions and by his words and by what he's offering us today and this weekend. So can we also receive that for ourselves and do the same for ourselves, right? So thank you so much for joining me today. I want to say I'm so grateful to be able to do this series. This is the last webinar. I will be doing more things like this in the future, so please stay tuned. The video of this webinar will be up on my website, and I will share that with you, that link with you through email as well. And so, as always, you can go to deeperministry.com to find out more about what I do, more about coaching. And if you need help working through this time or anything in your life, please reach out. I do a free initial coaching session for anybody, so we can start there. So, anyways, happy Easter, Good Friday. Love you guys, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.